Hi everybody, welcome to a much snowier ride home. It is so snowy today and I'm on my way to go and vote. It's a civic responsibility. I'm not sure if this car is going to work for this. I'm on my way to go and vote, which, as I said, it's a civic responsibility to do. You gotta go and vote, you gotta go make your voice heard. Now, what people will say is they'll say, if you don't vote, you've got no right to complain. I mean, yeah, but there's sort of more to it than that. When you are casting a ballot, you are making a choice for somebody that you want to be in charge of certain things. You're making a choice for who you want to be in charge of your financial policy, of your taxation, somebody that you want to be in charge of waste management and libraries and stuff like that. And it's important. I don't want you to think that it's irrelevant, not important, anything like that. It is. It's quite important, actually. These things are important and they matter. But there are certain things that you don't get to vote on. Something that I want you to know and to learn, if you learn nothing else from me, today at least, is that everything is a democracy even when it doesn't seem like it is. There's one big exception to that rule, but in general, everything's a democracy. What do I mean when I say that everything's a democracy? I mean that even things that don't seem to be tied to democratic processes really are tied to the will of the people. It may surprise you to know that things like monarchy are really a democracy when it comes right down to it, because unpopular kings and queens that violated the will of God, that kind of thing, could be and were deposed. And when they were deposed, they were likely killed. Like if you were the king of England or something like that, and you were found to have violated God's holy law, you were found to have been grossly abusive of your position and your role, the people would rise up against you and have you killed. Now, that's bad for a prospective king, obviously. Not good. But of course, something that tied the entire thing together, when we're talking about checks and balances in a system, something that tied it all together in a monarchy system was that if the royalty was found to be abusing their power in some way, that the citizenry could depose them, because the monarchy ruled by the divine right of kings. So that was. So if you were somebody who was grossly abusing your power, was just taking advantage of everything, didn't really care how things went, happy to just take everything from your citizenry, have a ton of mistresses, ignore the gospel, that kind of thing, the people would have you put down, literally. But of course, now we have this idea that everything's accountable to the will of the people, when in times gone by there was a separate standard that even the king, who had like full divine authority, who ruled by divine fiat, who ruled with absolute power, could not override the will of God, was held in check by the power, not of the church, but of the people of God. They were the big check to the power of tyrants. Now, when we're thinking about voting, when I say that everything's a democracy, I mean that all kinds of things are a democracy. Capital, stores, the opening hours of stores. People have asked me, Pastor Jim, why don't we do our absolute level best to make sure that stores don't open on Sunday? And I'm saying, well, we could, but in effect, the fact that stores are open on Sunday is a democratic thing. People have decided that they want the stores and the brunches and the sports to all be running on a Sunday morning, ergo, therefore, they are. That's how that works. But one thing is not a democracy. That's the will of God. That doesn't change. We don't have any right to affect that. When rulers were held in check by the power of Almighty God, that was a heavy, heavy check on them, because it was one thing that even though they were governing by divine right, they couldn't change. They couldn't amend. They couldn't alter. It stood as a check to the powerful in the same way as it stood as a check to the powerless. Whether you were somebody who commanded armies or somebody who just scraped a living together making barrels, the prohibitions against stealing and murder and adultery applied to you both equally. Your position in life didn't change that, but you weren't allowed to do anything to change it. Not one thing. You can't reach into the scriptures and pull the parts out that don't suit you. So what that meant is that powerful kings were held in check by the will of Almighty God and His Word and His commandments and decrees and statutes that stopped them from doing literally whatever they felt like. That's good. Like, that's really good, because right now I don't know if we have that same kind of check in place, because the only checks that are in place to earthly government are the checks that we make ourselves, and therefore ergo can be changed. Which means that if you have somebody who consolidates power effectively enough, all of a sudden there is no limit to what they are able to do, and the people have no external recourse to go to. You can't say whatever king, government, ruler, prime minister, president, whatever, shouldn't be doing these things, because there is no actual check to that authority beyond what that person is able to change. There should be certain things that are outside of the ability of a ruler to change or alter, that act as a check to their power. Because politics, functionally, is an exercise in power. It really is. It is us giving up our individual power to somebody larger than ourselves who will use that power hopefully on our behalf. But what if they don't? What if they're corrupt? What if they don't really feel like using their power on our behalf? What if they feel like doing something completely different? Well, how do you stop them? If they are bigger and stronger than you, how do you stop them? If there are more of them than there are of you, how do you stop them from doing that? At what point do you point to an authority beyond their ability to control it and say you can go so far, but no further? Once you surrender that, then you do surrender any kind of great binding feature that applies to both great and small. That was the one thing that kept the monarchy in check, and it was the one thing that originally kept all earthly powers in check, was that they were bound to the same moral principles beyond alteration that everybody else was. King or peasant, all bound to the same rules. And something that helps a lot with raising your children in a moral way is you don't raise them in a morally relative way. That you can point to certain things and say these are okay for adults and these are not okay for adults or for children for a few reasons, and you can get into those. But you can't ever, as an adult, say it's okay when I do it, but I don't want you to do it. Right? Like, you can't say that. You can say you can't do this yet, but you can't ever say, do as I say, not as I do, because you are going to confront them with a law that binds you both, right? That you're living and bound under the same law as they are, that is above your right as a parent to change. Just because you are an adult, you don't get to change or alter the rules of God. And that wrenches them out of their desire to do only one, to do what they feel like doing at any given moment, and instead impels on them the need to do what is good and right, not just according to you, but according to God. But you have to be bound by the same rules. Otherwise, it doesn't work. And I wish it did, but it doesn't. You can't expect your children to follow through on what's right and wrong according to you if you're not willing to do it, and eventually they'll find out. But if you approach them with a morality that is above either of you to change, you can't alter it, you can't change it, nor can they, and you present that to them and you say, this is what we believe, teach, and confess, this is how we live our lives, this is what we prioritize as being important to us, and this is how you're going to live not just as a child, but all your life. And it's beyond my will to change it and your will to change it. Nobody can change these things because they become inconvenient. Then that should hold for a lifetime. Not just until they're old enough to defy you. Not just until they're old enough to get out on their own and they can do what they want, but as a lifelong thing that is an expectation that not just you have for them, but that God does. People have the big question where they'll say something along the lines of, why is it that there's just never like an atheist elected as president or something like that? How come there can't be one? They've all got to have that vague fig leaf of the Christian faith attached to them in some way or another. I'm like, yeah, well, of course they do. Obviously. Like, I'm not saying that that's, like, only a Christian could be a good president. I'm not saying that. I'm sure there's a possibility somebody who doesn't believe in anything could be, because I'll bet some of them did and do. But that presence of a power, of acknowledging a power greater and larger than themselves, that they can't defy just by sheer force of will, that they can't change or alter to suit them, that's important, especially the more power somebody has. The more power somebody has, the more authority they have, the more you're going to want a larger power in check over them. If you don't have that, then you're really trusting your luck and hoping that they do the right thing, which they might not. You've got to go with a different course where they are binding themselves voluntarily to something that they can't control. And only if they do that can you trust them, really. Otherwise, you've just got to hope that they don't become a tyrant. You've got to cross your fingers and trust your luck and say, boy, I sure hope this president, this premier, this prime minister, I sure hope they don't become a tyrant once they get enough of a taste of power. Sure. I mean, I hope so too. But there's really no promise of that unless something larger than themselves makes them do it. And they have to really, really care about that, want that, and live accordingly. All right, I'm at my polling station, which means it's time for me to vote. I'll catch up with you guys next time. Thanks for joining.